guys, so now we're gonna get into part 2, and part 2 is how I made the wig. So I'm gonna show you every step, all the details of how I made this wig. So if you're interested, go ahead and stay tuned and we'll get to the details. So one of the things that you'll need in order to make a wig is a canvas head and a stand to put the head on. You can usually buy them at your local beauty supply store. That's where I got mine. To get the perfect fit of your wig, you do want to make sure you measure the circumference of your head so that you can get the right size canvas head. And for me, the size canvas head I use is a 22. And I'll also add a link in the description of any videos that I can find for you guys to show you how to take those measurements. Another thing you'll need is a dome cap. You can also use a mesh cap if you like, if you just want a little more filtration on your scalp. But for me, I just use the dome cap. And you'll also need stick pins or T-pins, and you'll need that to hold your tracks to the canvas head. You will also need a needle and thread. They have different shapes of needles and different curves, but I like the U-shaped curve. That for me is easier to sew with. And you're going to want to make sure you pre-thread your needles before you start. And of course, the most important thing that you'll need is your bundles and your closure. I just used a 4x4 closure, a lace closure, and this hair is just hair that I had already had and just decided that I wanted to go ahead and make a wig out of. So this is optional, but you can draw guidelines on your dome cap in order to guide you where you need to sew your wefts as you go, and that just makes sure that everything is straight. So I like to start with my closure first, so then that way I can just sew the tracks around it. And I'm basically just going to take my stick pins and stick the closure in place where I need it to be on the cap. And I'm going to do that all the way around. Also in the back, I'm going to stick a couple stick pins in just to hold it in place. Now when I thread my needle, I just double the thread up. So I stick it through the needle and pull it down until both ends of the thread are even, and then I tie a small knot at the end of it in order to keep it from unthreading. When I do my very first stitch, I stick the needle through the closure and then I thread it through the two pieces of thread, if that makes sense. So I kind of open up the thread and stick the needle in between those two pieces just to make sure that my first stitch is secure. And as you can see, for the rest of the stitches, I stick my needle in going under, and then I also try to make sure I pull the stitch through the loop or between the two pieces of thread. And I believe that is called a cross stitch. And that is one of the best ways to get a secure sew in, because it kind of crosses the stitches over each other and they won't come unraveled as easily. And I'm going to continue using this same stitching technique all the way around my closure until I get to the very end of the closure. And it is okay to remove the stick pins as you go. I do, just to make sure that everything is secure from my stitching and not the pins. So I will take them out as I go around the closure. When I got to this point of my closure, I actually went ahead and tied a knot, and I just did that by sticking the needle through the loop, basically the same way I did when I did the stitch. But for that last one, I did it twice. I doubled it up. So I did a double cross stitch, and then I even tied it in a knot in order to keep it even more secure. And I always use that same stitching technique whenever I get to the end of my wefts or when I get to the end of this closure. As you'll see here, I did the same exact thing when I got to the end. I looped it through and then I tied it in a knot. And you want to cut the thread as close as the knot as possible without actually cutting the knot, because you don't want it to unravel. So those are pretty much the steps that you need to take as far as sewing the wig down, and you're just going to do that all the way around the closure. And once you have sewed the closure down, then you'll be able to start with sewing the wefts on. Okay, so now we're going to start sewing on our tracks, and when I sew on my tracks for the very first part of it, I do like to double up the weft to just give me a little bit more fullness towards the bottom. Now don't do this on top because you'll get bulkiness, but at the bottom you can definitely double up. And then I'm going to go ahead and take my stick pins. I'm going to stick the hair in place, and I'm going to follow my guidelines that I drew, so then that way I can keep my weft straight. And I'm basically just going to follow that same exact technique that we just showed you earlier, the cross stitching technique. And you're going to do that all the way throughout this wig pretty much. That's just the same technique you're going to use to sew down the hair. So if you guys are enjoying my video so far, don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so that you can know when I upload more videos and stay updated. So when I get closer to the top of the wig, this is where I'm going to stop doubling up my wefts just to avoid any bulkiness at the top. And I am going to make sure that I cut my wefts when I get to the end, so then that way, instead of folding them over each other, I will cut them. Now in the back, I do fold them over each other just because the back is not going to show as much, but in the front I don't use that technique because you'll end up with bulkiness around the edges of the wig and you don't want that. And one other thing is that throughout the sewing, you do want to make sure you're not putting your tracks too close together, because that will also cause bulkiness. So I try to leave at least an inch to a half inch of space between each track, so that way everything can lay smoothly. Okay, y'all, so my bad, my camera died, so I had to grab my phone real quick just to show y'all the top, because we're almost finished. But when you get to the top, make sure that when you're sewing the wefts onto the cap that you don't sew them too close. And now we're about at this section here, we're going to literally just probably put one more track right here. I'm going to do one more track and bring it all the way around, because it's about the same on both sides. One more track, and then from there, this little gap right here, I'm just going to do probably 2 or 3, maybe 4 tracks, just going from here to here, just to fill in that little gap. And they're just going to go straight across like this. And make sure again that you don't put them too close, because you don't want it to be bulky on the top. And this is where we are. Definitely making some progress. Can't wait till it's finished. It's gonna be so cute. I'm excited. And we're gonna style it, put some curls in it, maybe even straighten it, I don't know, but that'll be the next step. Oh, one other thing I meant to add, do not sew your tracks right on top of the closure. So don't put the tracks on the thread. So you see these little threads right here from where we sewed the closure. Do not put your tracks on top of that. Try to leave a little bit of space, just a tiny bit of space in between that. Because in the future, if you decide, my closure is getting thin, or I want to change out the closure, then it'll be easier to cut these threads and not unravel the rest. I went ahead and sewed the hair in between those 2 spots. And again, I did not sew it right on top of the closure. I left like a little teeny space right there. And I did that on both sides. Okay, now that we're finished with sewing the wig together, now we're going to go ahead and cut that piece of cap that's underneath the closure, so that way the closure can be open and you won't have that black cap right underneath it. Alrighty y'all, so the wig is finally finished, and again, if you want to see how I added the highlights, the link to that video is also in the description, so you can go ahead and watch that. And also I'll have a video on there on my makeup that I did in this video as well, so there will be a makeup tutorial, and all of that will be located in the description. And also don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can stay updated on my new videos. And thank you for watching.